Perhaps the most concerning of all the government UFO accounts is the story that you may have heard about UFOs being found to have the ability to disable United States nuclear missiles. If anything would warrant official investigation, it would be that, right? So here's Congressman Mike Gallagher grilling representatives of the U.S. Navy's UAP task force at a congressional hearing in May 2022.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed and interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly, and not just ranges, but some facilities housing our strategic nuclear forces. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Brave. You've been looking at UAPs over the last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Okay, but are you aware of the report, or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
Well, I have, because it's been publicly available for a long time. The event Gallagher is referring to happened in 1967, well over half a century ago, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, home to the 341st Strategic Missile Wing of Minuteman ICBMs. The only reason anyone knows about this incident is this book, Fated Giant, co-written in 2005 by UFO author Robert Salas. He's written at least 3 books about UFOs, and he was actually one of the missile officers on duty that day in 1967. So to learn more about this, I called up a friend of mine.
My name is Hal Bidlack. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. In my career, I spent my first assignment as a finger-on-the-button guy, an ICBM launch officer. I ultimately earned a PhD and taught at the Air Force Academy for much of my career.
Are there a lot of missileers out there?
It's a relatively small and tight community within the military.
So had you heard this story before?
No, and frankly, that makes me suspicious. As I said, it's a small, tight community, and odd things do happen where missiles break from time to time, and we know about those. But the fact that I've never heard of this story is yet another reason to suspect it's of doubtful origin.
A lot of people have tried to find out what really happened there, including by filing Freedom of Information Act requests. In 2001, the Air Force responded with 84 pages. A lot of it consisted of the reports of technicians from Boeing, which built the Minuteman, and these technicians were called in to investigate and figure out what went wrong. Apparently, an entire flight of 10 missiles all did reboot themselves on that day. The report focused on the power to these launch facilities. How do these launch facilities get their power?
Well, just like any homeowner, they plug into the grid. That is the primary source of power. There's also backups in terms of batteries and diesel generators should that power fail or be out of tolerance.
So according to this now declassified 1967 report from Malmstrom Air Force Base, Fergus Electric is the company that supplied the commercial power. So it says here, a 7.2 kilovolt transformer shorted in the line to site Echo 3 at 1450 March 16, 1967. This transformer is located on a farm 2 miles south of the Winifred substation. Automatic reclosure switches at Winifred substation opened and were reclosed manually after transformer replacement later in the day. This caused the brine chiller problem at Echo 1. Sites Echo 3, 5, 6, 9, and 10 transferred to standby power. Site Echo 1 transferred to direct current operation. Then it goes on to talk about the same thing happening at sites 7 and 8. But does that seem to make sense to you?
Absolutely. The ICBM sites are by design in very rural and distant locations, and they rely on the local power grid. They're also designed to protect themselves. So yes, if a current problem occurred, they would cut themselves off from that, they'd restart their electrical power, and wait for the outside current to stabilize.
Could a power event like this cause the missiles to reboot themselves?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be a common event, but it's also not unheard of.
So if the only thing that happened was this power surge from the blown transformer, and that caused the missiles to reboot normally, how long were they actually down for? The report goes on to say that the exact time estimates couldn't be established, but it was approximately 10 to 40 seconds that the missiles were offline.
Seems reasonable.
So in your experience, an event like what we're talking about would have been unremarkable enough that you say you hadn't heard of it?
Well, in that time and place, it would be remarkable just because it's very uncommon to have anything out of the ordinary happen. Missiles have about a 99.9% reliability and on-alert record. So it would certainly be known at the time, but it would not be passed down through the years as some kind of shocking event.
In his books, Salas actually attributed the missile restarts not to the power outage, but to UFOs, the glowing red orbs that Congressman Gallagher asked about. Well, the Air Force did check that out. They found, quote, rumors of unidentified flying objects around the area of Echo flight during the time of fault were disproven. A mobile strike team, which had checked all November flight's launch facilities on the morning of March 16, 1967, were questioned and stated that no unusual activity or sightings were observed. Here is what actually happened. That power outage caused all 10 missiles to reboot themselves. They were down for no more than 10 to 40 seconds total. Then, 8 days later, in the town of Belt, Montana, someone reported seeing a UFO to the local paper. There's no logical reason to conclude one thing had anything to do with the other. 38 years later, Salas writes a book about what he thinks he remembers, and he's sure the UFO and the missile reboots were on the same day at the same place. The records show he's wrong. I think he's probably honestly mistaken. 38 years is a long time, but regardless, he's wrong. And now today we've got something of a conspiracy theory community who believe it's impossible that he was mistaken, and therefore the Air Force must be covering up the truth, a truth revealed in the book. So, Colonel Bidlack, you and Salas both worked in a field dealing with a lot of classified events.
You bet.
If the Air Force classified something or covered it up, would you be allowed to freely write about it and reveal it?
No, I could not. If I chose to do that, I'd be setting myself up for significant problems under the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Publishing about classified events is no joke. Mark Owen was the pen name of one of the Navy SEALs who got bin Laden, and he wrote a 2012 book about it called No Easy Day. To get the book out fast, he and his publisher decided to skip submitting the book to the Department of Defense for review. Owen never got charged with a crime, but he had to turn over all $6.8 million in royalties that he'd made and give it to the government. Tom Clancy, author of the Jack Ryan novels, famously got questioned by the FBI after his book, The Hunt for Red October, came out. Apparently, it did reveal classified information, but he showed them all the legal sources where he got everything, so there wasn't anything they could do. So he went on to write freely about this. He wrote about it in 2 more books. He's spoken about it on podcasts, and he's spoken about it at UFO conferences. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you the Air Force just doesn't care, which strongly suggests that it's fiction. And as we know, fiction is not classified.
So the only evidence that UFOs can deactivate our nuclear missiles is one man's 38-year-old memories that contradict everything that's in the record. That's about as anecdotal as it gets. The claim of UFOs having the ability to disable nuclear arsenals does not meet any reasonable standard of evidence.